Well, welcome to the Other Side of Medicine. I am Dr. James Christosic, aka Dr. J. Glad that you're with us today here on the Other Side of Medicine. We bring together three foundational principles: common sense, backed up by good science and cooperation with nature. That's the modus operandi that we have been working with for over 30 years on the radio and now on this podcast. And we bring you cutting edge breakthrough health information your doctor won't tell you about. We have guests on this program, nationally and internationally known guests in natural medicine, functional medicine, integrated medicine. These experts bring you research based information, clinical experience, and all wrapped up with cooperation with nature, because we believe that the power that God has placed inside the body can heal almost every disease known to man. So as long as we are willing and ready to cooperate with that power that God has placed inside the body, miracles happen. Yes, and I've seen it over the years in my practice, and many of these doctors tell the stories of their patients. It is extraordinary. And if you are looking for a way out of being caught into the medical gerbil wheel where you're taking medication after medication, having to go through surgical procedures, and you don't have any hope, well, you've come to the right place. We're glad that you're with us. And tonight, I'm excited to be able to share with you something that I think is really important to our well-being. And I've been talking about the connection between our gut and our overall health, the global health of our body. Every single system, every organ and system of the body is affected by what goes on inside the gut. Hippocrates, as you know, the father of medicine over 2,000 years ago, said all disease begins in the gut. And in reality, he wasn't too far off, because now researchers are beginning to validate what he said. Now, I've been doing it for 2,000 years, but I've been doing it for 30 plus years, sharing with people about the connection between our gut and our health or disease state. Because we know now, with the current research that's exploding, that there are so many things that are linked to the integrity of the gut. When our gut is in good working order, when we have good digestion, good absorption, we have good elimination, and we have a right balance of the good and the bad bacteria inside of our gut, researchers are discovering the link between all of these things with good health. And if we don't have these things in order, then we end up having dis-ease. You don't have to let disease rule your life. And as you'll find out today, on this subject, we'll be talking about the 911 gut prescription, that most diseases begin or have a profound influence by what goes on inside the gut, including psychological disorders like depression and anxiety, schizophrenia, attention deficit disorder, Alzheimer's, autism. All these things, science now is finding there's a connection between the gut, which they call the second brain, and our brains up here. The things that go on in the gut affect our moods and our behavior. Not only the brain disorders, but lung disease and kidney disease and heart disease and immune disorders, autoimmune diseases, reproductive disorders, thyroid disease, heart disease, as I said, cancer even is linked in many respects to what goes on inside the gut. And as you'll find out in this presentation over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be unveiling to you the research that is validating what I've been talking about over 30 different years, over the time, sharing with people how profound of effect the gut has. So a healthy gut leads to a healthy you. And so we want you to understand that if you take responsibility for your health and you cooperate with nature, then your body has the power to heal itself. And that, to me, is worth taking to the health bank. But unfortunately, modern medicine, standard medicine, the conventional type of treatments that are done today do not look at how the gut affects our global health, every single system of the body. As a matter of fact, what medicine does today is look singularly at specific organs or specific systems of the body and focuses on treating those systems. If you have, for example, a lung disorder, if you have pneumonia, they're going to treat the lungs. If you have a kidney infection, they're going to treat the kidneys. If you have psoriasis, they're going to treat the skin. If you have allergies, they're going to treat your immune system. If you have depression, they're going to treat your brain and look at chemical disorders inside going on in your brain. They don't look at what is going on in the gut. The gut has a distinct effect on every single system of the body, but we do in functional medicine. We now are beginning to see the explosion of research in these areas and how the gut affects every system of the body. So we're going to be looking at how today, because of how medicine is treating only symptoms, we are ending up with epidemic levels of chronic disease. Instead of going upstream to treat the cause, medicine's going downstream and treating the symptoms with medications or surgical procedures, paying lip service to diet and lifestyle, a very cursory introduction to diet. When you go to your doctor may say, make sure you're eating a healthy diet. Well, what the hell does that mean? A healthy diet? I mean, I could talk to 10 different people and they'll all give me 10 different definitions of what a healthy diet is. Your doctor has to be more explicit, more definitive, and they're not. They're not giving you what is talked about in the research and what the research is validating today. So, medicine is looking at treating symptoms, treating specific parts of the body. And when we in functional medicine look at treating the individual, we treat the whole person and we look at the interconnectedness. One part of the body is connected to another part of the body. And certainly in the gut, it has its tentacles reaching out to every single system of the body. And it's often the root cause of many chronic diseases. Yeah, and there's a lot of other things that could be causing disease, like toxicity and a weakened immune system. And we know there are other variables that we have to look at, stress. And of course, these things should be taken into consideration, but they all affect the gut. And what happens to us in the environment affects our gut in a profound way. And as you'll see, as we go deeper into this presentation, you're going to be surprised how our guts and our environment interact in a profound way. So let's look at a little bit more about how the gut affects all of the systems of the body. Now, I'm going to move to the next slide here. There we go. Okay, so what's unfortunate is that in our country today, we have an epidemic of chronic diseases. Now, listen to these statistics, folks. I'm going to tell you, if you're not staggered by these statistics, I don't know what will stagger you and what will get you to pay attention. But we today in America have about 350 million people living in our country. We have it's getting close to 200 million people, give or take, a few million, but we're talking about over 60% of the adult population has one chronic disease. Over 47% of the population has two or more chronic diseases, folks. 47% of the population, that's around 160 million people. These are staggering statistics. People are suffering with chronic diseases, being treated with medications, surgical procedures, and never getting to the underlying cause. And listen to this statistic. People who are 60 plus years, 60 and above, 80% of those people have two or more chronic diseases. That's appalling. In the richest country in the world, we have one of the lowest rates of health in the world, not health care. We get a lot of health care. We get, in the result we get is poor health. We're just a little bit healthier than the people in Cuba and in between Cuba and Costa Rica. Costa Rica is healthier than we are. And these are underdeveloped countries for the most part. And yet we have a much lower rate of good health in our country than they do. Now, it's no better for children. This is this part of this the statistical analysis. Children, 27% of children have at least one chronic disease, and 7% of children have more than two chronic diseases. Now, this is, again, in the richest country in the world. We should be appalled at that. We should be ashamed of that and looking at what we can do to make a difference. Doctors today are not looking at the interconnectedness of all the body parts, including how the gut affects as its tentacles going out to every system of the body. Now, I want you to ponder this for a minute because this is a very important slide here. Knowledge is something that we have so much of today. We have the internet, just exploding the information age that we have. So there's a lot of information, there's a lot of knowledge about health, but it's not being applied in our medical system as far as what we know about how to achieve good health. So knowledge is all about the stuff, the information, the data. We have a lot of knowledge, but we don't have a lot of wisdom. Wisdom is all about how we use that stuff, how we take advantage of that knowledge that we have. We're not. There's so much information about health, as you will see tonight. The things that we'll be talking about, your doctor does not talk about these things as you go to a family practice or even a specialist. You don't get this kind of information. So I want you to really realize that it's up to you, each individual, to take a proactive role in your health and start to get some information and knowledge. There's a lot of information on the internet that you can get, but I'm just going to warn you again, there's a lot of knowledge, but you have to have the experience to go with that knowledge. And that's where common sense comes in, because there's a lot of misinformation about what to eat today. A lot of people are getting caught up in diets that are not very healthy. Maybe in the short term they are, but long term they're not. And that's where common sense comes in. And here on the Other Side of Medicine, we look at populations of people from around the world who have the healthiest individuals living in their country and have a time-proven system of diet and lifestyle, like the Mediterranean people, like the people in, as I mentioned, Costa Rica, the people in South America, especially the people who live in the rural areas, like in the rural China, even in Asia, for example, in Okinawa and in the rural areas of China. These people are extraordinarily healthy because they're so far away from modern society, which has tainted our environment with our food supply and the air and the water. And as a result, we end up having a lot of dis-ease. And so we got to get back to common sense and basics. We've got to start using the information that we have, but we need to pepper that with experience of the people from around the world who are the healthiest populations, and use the clinical data that we know about how we can take care of our gut and the rest of the body. And there's so much that we can take advantage of today that it's really sad that we don't. And our doctors are not using the wisdom of these people from around the world that I think is important and imperative to use. So let's dive in now to why does gut health matter? Why does the integrity of the gut matter? And how does it affect us? Well, let me just give you a couple examples of, with my practice over the past 30 years, how the gut has affected in such a profound way to help so many people. By fixing the gut, I've been able to watch and changing people's lifestyle, what they eat, how they live, the water they drink, how they move, all these things interplay and affect the gut, by the way, as you'll see. But over the past 30 years, I've seen people with chronic headaches and migraines, people with, joint pains, and people with digestive disorders, bloating and gas and irritable bowel and inflammatory bowel disease and autoimmune diseases like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and things like Hashimoto's disease, which is a autoimmune thyroid condition, and inflammatory bowel diseases like Crohn's disease and ulcerative colitis. Some of these people were told they had to be on medications for the rest of their lives, and yet by the power that God has placed in the body, their body was able to heal itself, and body parts are still intact, just right where the Lord intended them to be. And so I've seen people with psoriasis and people with eczema and people with heart disease, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and people with congestive heart failure, and people who are suffering with depression and anxiety, who were able to overcome these things and get off the medications. People with diabetes, people with all kinds of chronic disorders, even autism. I've seen children with autism have miraculous cures. I'm going to use that word cure because I have not cured one thing. The body has the ability to cure disease. All I've been is the facilitator to help people to use what resources God has given us to help to heal the body. Just like Susan, a 3-year-old who was suffering from eczema from 2 or 3 months after birth. She had very, very severe eczema. And for over 3 years, she suffered with that eczema, going to multiple doctors, specialists, on 18 different medications. This is her own mother's, was on television sharing this story. 18 medications, and her daughter was getting progressively worse. And then when she brought her daughter to me and we healed her gut, and we able to replace the good bacteria, get rid of the food sensitivities, and repair the lining of the gut, she was able to overcome her chronic eczema. She had scabs all over her legs and her arms and the rest of her body, and yet in a couple months it was gone after suffering for 3 years. And then there was Stephen. Stephen was a 7-year-old when his mother brought him to me, and he was diagnosed with autism. And Stephen literally was climbing the walls of my office. I kid you not. He was sitting in a chair. I came back in the office. He was on the desk and he was climbing the walls. And in less than 6 months, Stephen started to respond in a profound way. And in over a year under my care, Stephen was beginning to have social interaction, and his digestive disorder started to completely resolve. And he started to have a better attention at his mother homeschooled him, and he started to have better attention. Stephen went on getting off all the medications. He went on to go to college. This is a profound story of somebody who was going to have their life ruined for the rest of their life. And then there was Jessica. a 21-year-old who was diagnosed with lupus at 21. What a terrible gift to give her at her birthday. Lupus, an autoimmune disease with writhing pain in her joints and digestive disorders and fatigue, chronic fatigue. And yet, in less than 3 months, we had her off all of her medication, including the prednisone and all kinds of other meds that she was taking. And she was feeling better than she did in her entire life. And then there was Bonnie. Bonnie was a retired professional who was diagnosed with a rheumatoid arthritis or lupus. The doctors weren't sure what they were going to call it, but anyways, it was an autoimmune disorder. And she had very severe abdominal pains, digestive disorders, joint pains, fatigue. And Bonnie decided to go the natural route. She didn't take the medications that doctor prescribed. And in less than 3 months, she was feeling like a new person. And then there was John. John was a self-employed gentleman who was suffering with severe digestive disorders. John had bloating and gas and flatulence, and he had fatigue, he had diarrhea, and John was only eating about 5 different foods. He was very limited in the foods that he could eat because all the other foods would bother him. And in less than a couple months, he was off all of his medications and he had no symptoms. And he said he had more energy and better sleep. And he said those things are actually better than getting rid of all the symptoms with his gut, that he was actually energetic and sleeping like a baby. And then there was Mary. Now, Mary came to me and she was basically ready to commit suicide. That's how bad it was. And she said, I'm either going to kill myself or my family member. One of my family members is going to kill me because I'm so nasty to them. She had diabetes, chronic fatigue, high cholesterol, high blood pressure. She had irritable bowel syndrome. She had migraine headaches. She was riddled with all kinds of symptoms, and her doctors had her on about more than 10 medications. And when we started to heal her gut and change her lifestyle, she got off all the medications. She went back to teaching, and she actually went on to become a natural health counselor. And I saw her years later, by the way, and she was a type 1 diabetic. And she told me that she actually got off all of her medication. I was shocked because normally you don't see a type 1 diabetic able to get off medication. Now, whether she was improperly diagnosed, I don't know this, but I was just told by her she got off all of her medication, including her insulin. Folks, this is the kind of profound effect that occurs routinely, and I've seen it with thousands of my patients over the years. And when you start to respect the body and take care of the gut and begin to change your lifestyle, the body responds favorably to help to heal the body. This is how every system of the body is affected, whether it's the lungs, the heart, the liver, the kidneys, the skin, the immune system. Every single system of the body is affected by what goes on inside the gut. So let's take a look at the digestive system now, dive into that, and let's look at some of the things that go on inside of the gut. But before I do, I just want to share, let's just, for a moment, let's just talk about a typical day for a person who is busy in their life and has children and is really overwhelmed by it all. And so imagine that you have a family with children and you wake up late one morning and you're going to go to work and your children are trying to race to get to school. Your wife is trying to get you prepared and the children to go to work. Or maybe it's vice versa. Today we have people who are switching the order, and sometimes We have husbands who are staying at home and the mother goes to work, vice versa, whichever way it happens. Imagine that that's you, and you're trying to get ready for work, and you're late because you woke up late, and your kids are crying, and mama or dad are running around trying to get things together, and you finally rush out of the house. You maybe take a cup of coffee and maybe a piece of toast or something like that, and you head off to the office, and there's a traffic jam, and now you're even more stressed out, and you finally get to work, but you're late, and then your boss yells at you because of some things that are going on in the office, and some of the clients that you have maybe are not happy with the way the performance that is going on with what you provided for them, and now it's lunchtime, and after all these stressful events, instead of going out to get something healthy to eat, because you're so stressed, you resort to comfort foods. So you end up getting junk food instead of something healthy. And now you come back to work and your tummy is upset. You've got indigestion or you've got heartburn. And so you take some Pepto-Bismol or some Alka-Seltzer or some kind of over-the-counter medication. This is the typical standard American lifestyle and how they deal with situations and use food as a comfort so that they can somehow deal with the stress. When you do that, the gut is compromised, it's perturbed, it gets disturbed, and it causes an explosion of symptoms inside the gut. And we cover up those symptoms with medications. And sometimes they'll work for a short period of time, but over time, they lose their efficacy and you start having more problems. This is typically what happens to people. Now, as we look at the gut, let's look at in a deeper dive what happens when you abuse the body like that and what transpires over time. So the digestion starts in the mind. So if you're upset and you eat when you're stressed out, you're going to have gurgling and indigestion and heartburn. It's going to already begin to develop. And there's reasons why that. We'll talk more in detail, but that happens typically with people routinely. And so when you're relaxed, though, digestion, especially when you're eating healthy food, it's smooth and everything runs perfectly. But when you're stressed, your body doesn't produce the right amount of enzymes in the stomach. And you end up, if you're eating fast, you're not chewing your food, you're bolting it like a dog. That's even making it more difficult for digestion of food. So as the food, a bolus of food travels from the mouth, and by the way, inside the mouth, there's some digestive enzymes. And so when you don't chew your food properly, which most people don't, you don't break the food down properly, and you end up not getting those enzymes that are in your mouth mixed up with the food to break down those carbohydrates. So that causes maybe some gas and some bloating and indigestion as well. Once the food travels down the esophagus and gets into the stomach, that's when protein are digested, whether you're eating animal protein or vegetable protein like beans or nuts or seeds or grains. That's where the protein begins to get digested. Most proteins are broken down from digestive enzymes that are in the stomach called hydrochloric acid. And then, of course, there's pancreatic enzymes that helps to break down fat that comes and shoots in from the pancreas. And these are all digestive enzymes. And of course, there's bile that comes from the liver. All these things help to break down the food. When everything is working properly and you're eating natural foods, things go well. When you're not, then the enzymes become weaker and they are not breaking down the food properly, and you start to get symptoms from malabsorption of nutrients. You're not getting the nutrients that you need. Now, when that food is in the stomach, by the way, that acid, that hydrochloric acid, is extremely powerful agent to break down food. It's got a pH that's very acidic. It's about 1.5 to 2.8 on this acid scale. That's extremely acidic. 7 is neutral. 1.5 to 2.8 is very acidic. And that stomach acid is there to break down the protein, but it's also to protect you from having microorganisms go through the stomach and get into the intestinal tract. So that hydrochloric acid kills those microorganisms before they get into the gut. Very important. And so as people don't eat properly, don't digest their foods properly, the enzymes are not made because you may have what's called malabsorption of nutrients, or your body becomes tired because you've overworked it by eating too much, not giving the body a rest and time to recoup. So all these things will interplay, and if you're not paying attention to good practices of eating healthy food and following these natural principles, then you're going to end up having digestive disorders, and you're going to start having stomach cramps. You're going to start having all kinds of illnesses that stem from the gut that trigger symptoms, and you end up taking medications once again, and those medications, they end up causing a lot of problems, and people go through this vicious cycle over and over again. And this is where natural medicine can make a huge difference for you. Let me just take a second. I'm not going to be able to get this slide up here, so let me put this in here. I don't know why that's not doing that, but give me 1 second. Yeah, let me just change this here. Okay. Technology. Always something, huh? But the show must go on, so there we go. I thought it was going to go. Give me just 1 minute and we'll. There we go. Okay, finally. Okay. Whew. Always something with technology. It never ceases to amaze me how one thing happens, another thing happens, it just never ends. Okay, so let me get to the next slide here. Let's see where we're at here. Let's see. There we go. Okay, there we go. So we want to talk now about the next portion of digestion. I'm going to go back to this slide here. Let me get back here. Yeah, the next portion of digestion takes place in the small intestines. Now, the small intestines, there's about 20 feet of small intestines that we have. And then we have the large intestine. The large intestine is the last portion of the entire colon. That's only about 5 feet long. And so we've got 25 feet of intestines that the bolus of food, as it comes down through the stomach, goes through the intestinal tract. And in the small intestine, foods start to break down even in a more significant way. And we start to develop absorption of nutrients. And so inside of the small intestine, we have about 55 to 60% of nutrients from all the food that we eat are brought in from the small intestines. We have about I would say 20% of nutrients that are coming through the large intestines, primarily minerals and electrolytes. There are some other nutrients that are absorbed there, but it's only about 20%. So most of the absorption of nutrients are being drawn in and taken in through the small intestines. Now, in addition to having the absorption of nutrients, inside the small intestine, we have a lot of immune system cells. 70% of all the body's immune system cells, our body's immune system, the ability to fight disease, is in our small intestine. 70% of our entire body's immune system. That's profound. And then, of course, we have about 100 million nerve cells inside the intestines as well. So that's another thing we'll be talking about in greater detail. 100 million nerve cells. We have about 150 nerve cells inside of our brain and our head. There's 100 million nerve cells inside of the gut. And that's why the scientists are now calling the gut the second brain inside the body. So we could live without our large intestines, but we can't live without our small intestines. So doctors, when somebody has something as severe ulcerative colitis, which is in the large intestines, could literally take out the entire large intestine, the 5 foot, and they could have a colostomy bag and still live. You can't live without the small intestines. It's totally not possible. So the small intestine is vital. Both are important, and we should not get to the point where we take out a large intestine, because your life's never going to be the same. So protecting both is paramount. But what I'm trying to impress on you is that the small intestines we can't live without. So let's take a look, the next slide here, and take a look at the lining of the guts, primarily looking at the small intestine right now. Now, there's a lining inside the large intestine, but there's some distinct differences between the two. Inside of the small intestine, the lining of the gut, which is right here, point, that's right here. This is the lining of the gut, pointed right there. That lining is only one cell layer thick, and there's a mucus covering those one cells. Now, inside of the small intestine, there's only one layer of mucus. Inside of the large intestine, there's 2 layers of mucus. So we have less protection in the small intestine. And so we have to really make sure that we take extra good care of the small intestine, because if the damage occurs in the small intestine, if we get erosion of the mucus lining and the cells of the small intestines, we get a disease called Crohn's disease. Crohn's disease is in the small intestine. That's an autoimmune disease where the body attacks itself, attacks the cells of the small intestines. So we really need to protect that. And we're going to go into great detail a little bit later about how that lining of the gut gets damaged. And so the mucus lining is very important, because that mucus lining helps to make sure that inflammation does not get unleashed into the bloodstream from the small intestines. Because remember, we have absorption of nutrients that occurs in the small intestines. And those nutrients that are being absorbed also, if the damage to the lining of the gut occurs, then we could have bacteria and toxins from the intestines leak into the crypts of the small intestine and get into the bloodstream, because there's now damage to the lining of the gut. And we'll talk about the leaky gut a little bit later and how that affects this systemic problems in a very profound way. So the mucus layer is something that protects our small intestine as well as the large intestine from becoming leaky. And there are specific bacteria, beneficial bacteria, that scientists have identified. One of them is called Akkermansia muciniphila, and just remember AK bacteria. Those bacteria produce mucus as well as other, they have metabolites. They're breakdown products of that bacteria. When they die off, they have metabolites that, and they also produce these things called short chain fatty acids, which we'll kind of go into detail. So these are just breakdown products of the bacteria. And so the Akkermansia helps to coat that lining with healthy mucus. And it feeds that mucus layer. So it's a profound influence that has on the body. And if we're not taking care of making sure that we have healthy bacteria inside the gut, Akkermansia starts to decline, then we start having problems when we can get that gut lining to erode, and we start having leaky gut and a lot of other problems. So there's a profound influence that bacteria has on our side of our gut. Now, another thing that helps that lining of the gut, by the way, just a side note, is intermittent fasting. So when you don't eat for 12 or 14 hours, your body can repair itself. It just has this ability to self-repair. That's a powerful thing that God has placed inside the body. Just like when you leave land, the farmers call it leaving it land fallow. You let it sit for maybe like a year or two. The land regenerates itself. Well, God's placed that inside our creation to repair the lining of the gut too. So when you fast, when you abstain from food for intermittent fasting or for a couple, 2-3 days, the lining of the gut starts to repair, which is a very interesting thing to happen inside the body. Now, 90% of all calories and absorption of the energy that we get from food happens inside the small intestines. So it behooves us to take care of that small intestine. As I said, we can't live without the small intestine. And if we don't have good absorption of nutrients, we end up what's called malabsorption. And malabsorption can cause a lot of symptoms. It can cause abdominal pain, it can cause bloating, gas, flatulence, diarrhea, vomiting, deficiencies in nutrients, because nutrients are not being absorbed properly through the small intestines, can cause chronic diseases. We can end up having weight loss. We can have anemia. We can have reduced the ability of the body for the immune system to be able to protect us from chronic diseases. We can end up having many different diseases are caused from nutrient deficiencies. You can look that up on the internet when you get a chance and see nutrient deficiency diseases. And if we don't have good absorption of nutrients in the small intestine, we can end up with disease just from that alone. So disease results when we are deficient in nutrients, and malabsorption, just in a normal aging process, as people get older, they end up losing the ability for the body to absorb nutrients more as efficient as when they were younger. So we end up having malabsorption because of food sensitivities and food allergies. When you eat an anti-inflammatory diet, which most Americans are, which is loaded with a lot of sugar and a lot of animal protein and refined carbohydrates, we end up having inflammation result, and that causes malabsorption. When people eat too quickly and don't chew their foods properly, when we have stress, we get malabsorption. When we have diseases of the stomach or the gallbladder or the pancreas or the liver, and we can have malabsorption. So malabsorption, can really have a profound effect on causing disease, or if we don't take care of our small intestines, that's what will happen. If we're not drinking enough fluid, dehydration can cause malabsorption. I know some people will only drink maybe 1 cup of water a day. My friends, that's a malabsorption syndrome waiting to happen. You've got to make sure that you're getting sufficient fluids. So these are all things that most people are not doing. So let's go and look at how we get absorption. If you look over here on this little illustration, you'll see these little villi on these raised areas in the intestinal tract. These are called villi, and those villi is where the nutrients are absorbed. And so those villi can oftentimes get blunted. And celiac is a good example of that. In celiac disease, either part of the small intestines or a lot of the small intestine, these little villi here can get blunted, and the absorption is not going to happen properly. And when people end up having these damages to these villi, those little papillae, those little hair-like follicles, when they get damaged and it goes deeper, it can damage the cells, and then you get malabsorption. So we don't want that to happen. So we got to really take good care of the small intestines by getting good nutrition, good hydration, making sure we don't have a lot of stress. And if we take care of the body will take care of us. Okay, so let's dive into right now talking about the gut as the second brain inside of the body. That's what scientists are calling the gut now, the second brain. And here's the reason why they're calling it the second brain. You see, well, let me first of all say, when I say the second brain, when scientists call it the second brain, the brain inside the gut, the nerve cell inside the gut are not going to help you to be able to write a poem or to balance your checkbook or any of the things that the brain in your cabeza does. Not gonna do any of those things. But the brain in your gut alerts the rest of the body and communicates with the rest of the body. And we'll see the powerful communication system that occurs. So it communicates and it alerts the brain up here when something's going wrong. So there's a biodirectional communication. So biodirectional from the gut to the brain and from the brain to the gut. They're back and forth, the communication that's going on. And that biodirectional communication is taking place because inside the gut, as I said earlier, we have over 100 million nerve cells. And the nerve cells are inside of the gut communicating with the rest of the body. Now, if you look here at the spinal cord, that's the part of the central nervous system. And then we have the parasympathetic system, which is a connection that we have with what's called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is up here in the brain. It's up here in the head, in the brain. And it's a nerve that goes from up here in the brain all the way down through the spine, all the way down in, and it innervates the gut, and it innervates the heart and several other organs. So that vagus nerve is a connection, not from the spinal cord, but from its own set of nerves, and it has a profound effect on our digestion. And that's why, as a chiropractic physician, we look at the connection of the vagus nerve, which goes right through the cervical spine up in the atlas. It could have a profound effect. I've seen in my practice where people would have indigestion, or they've had heartburn, or they've had stomach distress by adjusting the atlas and taking the pressure off the vagus nerve. People's symptoms of indigestion, heartburn, and reflux would just go away just by doing that alone. So you can see the communication that occurs inside of the body between the brain and the gut is profound. Now, we also know that mood disorders like depression and anxiety and autism, as I said earlier, and Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's are also going to be affected by the bacteria inside of the gut. Now, that's another thing. We talked about the nerves inside the gut, but the bacteria inside the gut interplay with the nerves as well, and the nervous system. Now, as I said earlier, there's over 100 million nerve cells inside the gut. And there are also neurotransmitters that the gut makes, like dopamine and serotonin. 50% of dopamine and serotonin, which is a feel-good hormone, is produced inside the gut. And there are over 40 different type of hormones and different chemicals that are produced inside of the brain and inside of the gut. And many of the same chemicals that are produced inside of the brain are produced inside of the gut. So that's why there's this interplay between the gut and the brain and how it affects us in that profound fashion. So we really need to take care of the gut and make sure that we're looking at how it affects every system of the body. Well, we've just about run out of time today. Now, I'm going to really dive deeper into more of this digestive system and how the gut affects the entire body. Next week, we'll be back. And you'll be able, if you want to, go to my Facebook group at theothersideofmedicine.com. So just go to Facebook and The Other Side of Medicine and go to my Facebook group, and I'll provide these talks I'll be talking for the next 2 or 3 weeks. There's so much information to give. I just no way I can do it in 1 week. So come on back next week. If you miss next week, you can go to my Facebook group and you'll learn more about how the gut and the rest of the body are interconnected. So my friends, until next week, I'm Dr. Christosik. Make sure that you tell your friends about the podcast. Make sure that you go to the Facebook group and sign up, because I have a lot of information that I share with you in the Facebook group. Until next week, God bless you. We'll talk to you then.